A man sits at a kitchen table on a Wednesday afternoon with a pension packet, an IRA update, and a yellow sticky note from the bank reminding him to review his beneficiary information. The forms arrived 2 days ago. He set them on the counter, then moved them to the table, then stacked them under the electric bill, then pulled them back out. Not because the task is complicated, because the task is ordinary, and he has done versions of it before. Name, date of birth, social security number, signature line, account number, primary beneficiary, contingent beneficiary. He fills in the first lines without thinking. His hand moves the way it always has across these documents. Practiced. Clean. No hesitation at the account balance. No confusion about the fund allocations. He made those choices years ago and adjusted them when the market corrected and left them alone when the market recovered. That part of his life runs the way it should. He pauses at the beneficiary line, not because he does not understand the question, because he understands it completely. The form is asking him to name a person, a specific human being who will receive the financial consequence of decades of discipline. A person whose name should appear as naturally on this document as his own. The instruction line says full legal name of primary beneficiary. Beneath it, a second line says relationship to account holder. Beneath that, contingent beneficiary, in case the first one is unavailable. The form assumes a sequence. It assumes a structure already built. A wife, a son, a daughter, a domestic partner, a household that has operated long enough to produce an obvious answer. He reads the instruction again. The words are clear enough. What catches him is the assumption behind them, so quiet and so total that he wants to be sure he is not missing an alternative line. A different checkbox, a third option that says something other than name a person who shares your life. There is no alternative line. The refrigerator hums. A truck shifts gears on the street outside. Light from the window falls across a stack of account statements accumulated over 23 years of automatic contributions, rebalanced portfolios, and annual reviews he attended alone. The statements are filed in a cabinet by year. Some are in folders he labeled himself. Some are in the original envelopes, unopened, because he already checked the balances online. The records are clean. The system works. Nothing in this room suggests disorder. He has assets. He has organization. He has a home that is maintained. A car that is paid off. Insurance policies reviewed annually. A credit score that has never been an issue. He has no obvious name to write on the line. Nothing has gone wrong today. No emergency has occurred. No relationship has ended, because no relationship of that particular kind was in progress. The man at the table is simply holding a pen over a blank space on a form that millions of people fill out every year without pausing at all. And he has paused, not because of the money. The money is fine. The money has always been fine. That was the point of the money. The money was supposed to be the thing that worked even when other things did not. And it did work. It grew. It compounded. It sat in accounts earning returns while he slept and while he commuted and while he spent weekends doing the kind of quiet maintenance that no one notices because nothing breaks. The pause is not about the balance. The pause is about the destination. For most of his adult life, the accumulation had a simple internal logic. Save because saving is responsible. Invest because investing is what disciplined adults do. Protect the downside. Avoid unnecessary risk. Do not become dependent on anyone. Do not become a burden. Do not let the lack of a second income become a vulnerability. That logic held for a long time. It held through his 30s, when most of his friends were getting married and buying houses with dual incomes and splitting costs in ways he could not. It held through his 40s, when his net worth quietly surpassed several of those same friends, some of whom were now divorced and paying alimony or child support or both. It held through the years when people stopped asking when he was going to settle down and started asking nothing at all. The logic held because the logic was functional. A single man with no fallback household needs more savings than a married man with shared expenses. A single man with no children has no built-in support system for old age. A single man with no spouse has no automatic co-signer, no second earner, no one to call the insurance company if he cannot. The financial discipline was not neurosis. It was engineering, and it worked. But the form on the table is not asking whether the engineering worked. The form is asking what it was for. That is the fracture. Quiet, structural, almost invisible unless you are the one holding the pen. A man can build a financially responsible life over decades without ever being asked to explain the purpose of that life in writing. Tax returns do not ask. Bank statements do not ask. Annual reviews do not ask. He checks the balance on his phone sometimes, standing at the kitchen counter, waiting for the coffee to finish. The number appears. He looks at it the way a pilot checks an instrument. Confirmed, within range, functioning. The phone goes back in his pocket. The coffee pours. The number told him everything the number can tell him, which is that the system is on track. It did not tell him where the track leads. The money accumulates inside a system that tracks quantity, growth, allocation, and risk. It does not track meaning. It does not track destination. It does not ask who the money is protecting, or what future the money is building toward, or whether the money, in its growing silence, has become the only structure in the room, until the form arrives. And then the question is there, plain, bureaucratic, uninterested in his feelings about it, primary beneficiary, full legal name, relationship to account holder. He could write a sibling's name. He has a brother in another state. They talk occasionally, not often, not in a way that suggests his brother has been waiting for this designation. He could write a nephew's name, a niece, a friend, a charity. He could leave it blank and let the estate default to probate, which is what happens when no one is named, which is what the form is quietly designed to prevent. He could do any of these things, but the reason he has paused is not that he lacks options. It is that every option feels like a workaround for a structure he was supposed to have built by now. The form was designed for a man with a wife, or a man with children, or a man with a domestic partner whose name appears on this line the way a zip code appears on an envelope, automatically, structurally, without deliberation. The deliberation is the signal, and no one will see it. No one is in the room. No advisor will ask why it took him 3 weeks to return the packet. No institution tracks the duration of a man's pause over a beneficiary line. The data is binary, named or unnamed, filed or unfiled, complete or incomplete. But the pause is where the life actually lives. Because in that pause is something that does not appear on any statement. It is the quiet recognition that assets can accumulate faster than meaning. That a man can build a careful, disciplined, financially sound life and still arrive at a document that asks a question the money alone cannot answer. Not how much do you have, but who is this for? He sets the pen down, not dramatically. He is not the kind of man who does things dramatically. He sets it down the way he sets down a coffee cup when he needs a moment before continuing. He will come back to it. He always comes back to things. That is part of the system. Reliable follow-through. Reliable completion. Reliable order maintained across years of solitary operation. But right now, the form sits open on the table. The beneficiary line stays blank, and the question remains. Let's stay at that table for a while, not to analyze what the man is feeling, but to look at what is actually in front of him, the physical evidence, the material record of a life that has been managed with care. Start with the cabinet. A 2-drawer filing cabinet, the kind sold at office supply stores. Black. It sits in a spare bedroom that became an office years ago. Inside it, hanging folders. Green, labeled in his handwriting. Tax returns going back 7 years, which is what the IRS recommends, though he keeps a few extra years because he prefers to be thorough. Bank statements, investment summaries, insurance policies, the deed to the house, car title, warranty documents for the furnace, the roof, the water heater. This is not a man who lets things slide. The automatic contributions began in his early 30s. He enrolled in the 401(k) at work because someone in HR mentioned it during orientation, and he thought it made sense. He increased the contribution percentage every time he got a raise, the way the financial column suggested. He opened an IRA because the 401(k) had limits. He kept a savings account with 6 months of expenses and gradually pushed it toward a year because he had no second income to fall back on, and he understood that about his situation clearly. He did not do this because he loved money. He did this because he understood risk. A man living alone carries all of his own risk, every bill, every emergency, every appliance failure and medical expense and market correction. There is no one to split the cost with, no one to cover the mortgage if he loses his job, no one to drive him home from a procedure. The money was not greed. The money was a wall between him and dependency, and the wall held. It held when his company laid off a department, and his severance plus savings carried him through 5 months of job searching without touching his retirement accounts. It held when the roof needed replacing, and he paid for it without financing. It held when a health scare in his mid-40s meant 3 specialist visits and an outpatient procedure. And the bills came and he paid them, and the emergency fund absorbed the hit and replenished within 8 months. Every one of those moments confirmed the logic. Save more than you think you need. Spend less than you earn. Protect the structure. The structure protects you, and it did protect him. The discipline was real, and the results were real, and the stability was real. He did not end up in debt. He did not end up relying on family. He did not end up asking for help. He ended up at a kitchen table with a pen and a form and a blank line where a name should go. The statements in the cabinet tell one story. They tell the story of a man who did the right things, contributed consistently, rebalanced periodically, avoided high-fee funds, did not panic sell during corrections, stayed the course. That story is true, but it is not the only story the cabinet tells. Because if you look at the documents differently, not as evidence of financial performance, but as evidence of life architecture, a second pattern emerges. Every document in that cabinet was created by him, reviewed by him, filed by him, and understood by him alone. No one else has read them. No one else knows the logic behind the allocation. No one else understands why he chose the funds he chose, or why the house is titled the way it is, or what the savings account is actually earmarked for in his mind. The system is legible to exactly one person, and that person is the one sitting at the table. This is not a flaw in the man. It is a feature of the life. When you live alone and manage alone and decide alone, the entire architecture of your financial existence becomes a private language. You know why the Roth is funded before the traditional. You know why you kept the old brokerage account open, even though you moved most of the assets. You know what each account is for. You carry the map in your head, but maps carried in one head do not survive that head's absence. The form does not say any of this. The form just asks for a name. But the question beneath the question is whether this man's financial life, built with such discipline, and maintained with such care, can be read by anyone other than himself. The pension packet is not the only document in the room that carries this assumption. It is just the most direct one. Look at the life insurance policy sitting in the second drawer of the cabinet. He purchased it in his late 30s when a coworker died unexpectedly, and the office took up a collection for the family. He did not have a family, but the event sharpened something in him. He called a broker. He selected a term policy with a reasonable premium. The broker asked the standard question, "Who is the beneficiary?" He named his mother. She was alive then. She is not alive now. He has not updated the policy. Not because he forgot. He remembers. He has thought about it more than once. But updating it means answering the same question the pension form is asking, and the answer has not changed. So the policy sits in the drawer with a deceased beneficiary, which means that if he died tomorrow, the payout would go to his estate, which means probate, which means a court proceeding, which means exactly the kind of institutional friction he spent his whole life avoiding. He knows this. He has not fixed it. The reason is not laziness. Fixing it requires a decision he does not yet have a framework for. The framework was supposed to come with the life. The life was supposed to produce a household, a partner, a shared future. That is what the forms assume. Every beneficiary line, every joint account option. The financial system is built on the assumption that money lives inside a relational container. He sits at the table alone, and the documents do not adjust for that. A man can spend decades proving he is responsible and still arrive at a document that asks a question responsibility alone cannot answer. Consider what the outside world sees when it looks at this man. A colleague at work sees someone reliable, consistent, and unencumbered. No family emergencies pulling him away. No custody schedules limiting his availability. He is the one who can stay late. He is the one who can take the trip. He is the one whose calendar has fewer constraints. This is sometimes an advantage and sometimes a quiet form of conscription, but it is always visible. He is understood at work as the man without complications. A neighbor sees a man whose lawn is mowed, whose driveway is clear, whose garbage can come in on time. No noise complaints, no domestic disputes audible through walls. The house is maintained. The presence is calm. He is understood on the street as the man who does not cause problems. A sibling sees a brother who seems fine, who does not ask for money, who does not create drama at holidays, who shows up, contributes, and leaves without requiring management. He is understood within the family as the one who takes care of himself. None of these observers see a problem because there is no visible problem. The financial system works. The domestic system works. The social system works at the level it is asked to work. The man does not leak distress. He does not broadcast need. And that is precisely what makes the next layer invisible to everyone except him. There is a shape to his weekends that has not changed in years. Saturday morning, he makes coffee in a kitchen that is clean because it was clean when he went to bed. He sits at the table, the same table, and reads something on his phone or his laptop. The house is quiet in a way it is not uncomfortable, but is also not chosen fresh each time. It is the default setting of the space. He has not selected silence. Silence selected itself when no other presence arrived to change the acoustic. He goes to the hardware store, or the grocery store, or the post office. The errands have a shape. The cart looks similar each week, the same brands, the same quantities. Single portion packaging or bulk items that he portions himself because the per unit cost is better. A cashier does not notice. Why would she? The cart is just a cart. But the cart is also a portrait of a household running at exactly one person's scale, optimized by a man who noticed long ago that waste is inefficient and adjusted accordingly. He may eat lunch at a diner or a counter restaurant where the staff recognizes him not by name, by order. He is a regular in the way that solitary men become regulars. Present consistently, pleasant, tipping well, taking up one seat, reading something on his phone while the food comes. The interaction is warm at the surface and structurally shallow. It fills the minutes. It does not fill the hours. The afternoon is his. That is the phrase he would use. The afternoon is mine. And it is. He can do anything with it. Fix something in the garage. Watch the game. drive somewhere, sit on the porch. The freedom is real. The options are real. But there is a particular quality to freedom that has been operating without interruption for 25 years. It stops feeling like freedom. It starts feeling like weather, just the condition, the air he moves through. Unremarkable because it is constant. The adaptation happened a long time ago, and it was so gradual that it does not feel like adaptation. It feels like personality. He is a man who values his time, a man who does not need constant stimulation, a man who is comfortable with his own company. These descriptions are true. They are also the language that forms around a condition that was never fully chosen and was never fully unchosen. The solitude simply accumulated the way the money accumulated, steadily, without a single dramatic event that separated before from after. There was no decisive moment when he chose to be alone. There were a series of moments when he did not choose not to be alone, and eventually the moments compounded into a structure, and the structure became the life. He came close once, in his early 30s. Her name does not matter here, and the details of what happened belong to him. What matters is that it did not work out, and in the months after it did not work out, he did something that made sense at the time. He put more energy into the part of his life that he could control: the finances, the career, the house, the systems. He turned the volume up on competence and turned the volume down on pursuit. Not all at once, gradually. The way a man adjusts the thermostat by 1 degree every season until the house is a different temperature than it was 5 years ago, and he cannot point to the day it changed. By his late 30s, the dating question had become quieter, not silent, quieter. He still noticed women. He still thought about it, but the gap between thinking about it and acting on it widened, and the gap filled with work and routine and the steady accumulation of a life that functioned well without the complication. By his mid-40s, the question was mostly academic. Friends stopped asking. Family stopped hinting. The world reclassified him from not yet married to probably not going to be, and the reclassification happened without ceremony. One Thanksgiving, he was the uncle everyone expected would bring someone eventually. The next Thanksgiving, he was just the uncle. The absorption happened the way it always happened, the way he absorbed the health scare and the layoff and every other disruption that could have derailed his system. He processed it, filed it, moved forward. The emotional skill he developed was not suppression. It was something more precise. It was the ability to convert a potential source of pain into a settled fact, and then to build around the settled fact the way you build around a load-bearing column that cannot be moved. You do not pretend the column is not there. You design the room to accommodate it. Friends exist. That should be said. 2 or 3 men he sees regularly enough to call friends. They watch games together. They have dinner occasionally. They help each other with projects, the kind where a second pair of hands makes the job faster. These friendships are real. They are also structured at a particular depth. They do not involve financial disclosure. They do not involve conversations about what happens after death. They do not involve the kind of sustained mutual access that would allow one man to understand the complete architecture of another man's life. The friendships operate at arm's length. Arm's length is the default distance for adult male friendship in this country, and adjusting that distance requires a kind of explicit negotiation that none of them has initiated. They know each other's opinions. They know each other's routines. They know the surface biography. What they do not know, and have never been invited to know, is the interior structure, the filing cabinet, the account logic, the unsigned forms, the blank beneficiary line. He talks to his brother every couple of weeks. The calls last 10 to 15 minutes. They cover health, weather, sports, and family updates about people they both know. The calls are pleasant. They are also rituals rather than exchanges. The same topics in the same order. Neither brother raises anything that would require the other to respond with more than acknowledgement. The call is a maintenance function. It confirms that both men are alive and operational. It does not confirm anything deeper. Holidays have changed over the years. He used to attend Thanksgiving and Christmas at a sibling's house. He still does sometimes, but the gatherings have shifted as the family aged and redistributed. Nieces and nephews have their own families now. The table is fuller with people he sees once a year. He brings a bottle of wine. He helps clean up. He drives home alone, and the drive is the part of the holiday that feels most like his actual life. The highway, the headlights, the radio, the house at the end of it, dark until he turns on the porch light himself. He does not dread the holidays. He does not love them either. They exist in a neutral zone like the annual physical, something to be gotten through competently, a performance of connection that is not false, but is also not the same thing as being embedded in a household that generates its own holidays from the inside. His room accommodates it. The Saturday mornings, the single portion groceries, the quiet kitchen, the filing cabinet that no one else opens, the accounts that no one else reviews, the life that works at the scale of one. And the financial dimension of this life, which is what brings us back to the table and the form, is the part that receives the most attention from him and the most respect from others. Because money is measurable. Money is legible from the outside. When someone says he has his act together, they usually mean the money, the retirement account, the house, the absence of debt, the general appearance of a man who has made good decisions. And he has made good decisions. The numbers confirm it. By every metric the financial industry uses to measure readiness, he is ready. Ready for retirement. Ready for a downturn. Ready for an emergency. But there is something about being evaluated exclusively through the financial dimension that flattens a life. When the only evidence of competence is monetary, the money begins to carry more than its financial weight. It begins to carry identity weight. It becomes proof not just of solvency, but of correctness. The balance says, you are doing this right. And this expands gradually from your finances to your life. The money becomes a proxy for a broader assessment that no one else is performing. In a partnership, the assessment is distributed. A wife says, good idea, or I am not sure about that, or we should think about this differently. The evaluation comes from multiple sources, some financial, some emotional, some as simple as another person's expression across a dinner table. He does not have that distributed assessment. The money is the only instrument in the room that gives him feedback. And the money always says the same thing. You are solvent. You are secure. You are on track. There is a specific moment he recognizes. End of the quarter. The statement arrives, digital now, though he still prints it. He opens the file. The balance is there. Up slightly from last quarter, or down slightly, but within the expected range. A brief sensation of confirmation passes through him, the way warmth passes through a hand held near a radiator. And then the sensation is gone. In seconds, the statement is filed. The screen is closed. The rest of the evening is the same as every other evening. The number confirmed what the number always confirms. It did not say you should take the trip, or the kitchen looks dated, or when was the last time you did something that was not part of the routine. The money is a thermometer that reads only one temperature, and he has been reading it for 30 years. The terms on which he is ready are the terms of a single operator, and he has been the only one evaluating those terms for so long that their limits became invisible. The limits do not announce themselves during normal operations. They exist in the margins, in the edges of the system where function meets future. He watched friends go through divorces that cost them half of everything. He watched colleagues take on second mortgages to cover tuitions they could not afford. He watched relatives borrow against retirement accounts to fund emergencies that arose because household spending was uncontrolled. He watched, and he noticed that the paired life, the family life, carried financial risks that his life did not. And he noticed that his restraint, which others sometimes framed as absence, was in fact protection. He was not missing something. He was avoiding something. And the avoiding worked. Financially, the word needs to sit there by itself for a moment, because the qualification is the point. Financially, the avoidance worked. It produced a clean balance sheet, a strong net worth, in the absence of the specific financial damage that accompanies domestic disruption. Those results are real. They are his. He earned them through choices that required discipline, and choices that required sacrifice, and choices that required staying the course when the course was solitary. But financial results are not a complete audit of a life. They are one dimension of it. And the form on the table, the one with the blank beneficiary line, is introducing a second dimension that the financial results do not address. The second dimension is continuity, not the continuity of the money. The money continues on its own. Interest accrues, dividends reinvest, accounts persist. The continuity in question is human continuity, the ability of the life system to transfer understanding from one mind to another, the ability of someone somewhere to open the filing cabinet after he is gone and know not just what is inside, but what it meant. That architecture was never built. Nothing in his life demanded it loudly enough to override a system that was working fine on its own terms. No spouse asked him to get a will. No child's birth forced the question. No divorce attorney required asset disclosure. No shared mortgage demanded coordinated titling. Every trigger that forces most adults into succession planning is a relational trigger, and the relational triggers did not fire. So the assets accumulated, the accounts grew, the house appreciated, and the architecture of transfer, of succession, of legibility to someone other than himself remained unbuilt. The life insurance policy with the deceased beneficiary, the retirement accounts with no contingent beneficiary, the house titled in one name with no transfer on death deed, the filing cabinet with no second key, not because of neglect, because the system never needed a second key, until it did, and the moment it does, which is coming, which comes for every man who occupies a body that ages and a mind that will not run at full speed forever. The moment it does, the system meets its first real test. Not the market correction of 2008, not the layoff, not the health scare. Those were financial tests. The system passed financial tests. The real test is the one where money has to speak without him standing behind it. And money, on its own, does not speak. It sits. It waits. It follows the last set of instructions it received. And if the last set of instructions was incomplete, or absent, or filed in a cabinet that no one else can open, the money does not improvise. It defaults to probate, to statute, to institutional processes designed for the residue of lives that left no instructions. That is not a future he wants. It is also not a future he has prevented. Not yet. The pen is still on the table. The line is still blank. And the distance between the future he wants and the future the system will produce by default is exactly the width of one name on one form. But that distance is wider than it looks, because filling in the name is not just an administrative act. It is a structural modification to an identity that has been operating on the principle of self-sufficiency for 30 years. And self-sufficiency, once it becomes an identity rather than a strategy, does not yield easily to the suggestion that it is incomplete. The system was built to preserve control, and it preserved control beautifully. Every dollar tracked, every account managed, every risk hedged. But control and continuity are different achievements. Control operates in the present tense. Continuity operates in the future tense. And the future tense, for a man who has mastered the present, is the one tense the system was never conjugated in. He does not think about this every day. Most days, the system runs and the day passes, and the absence of a named successor is no more present in his awareness than the absence of a second car in the driveway. It is just the shape of the life, unremarkable from the inside. But some days the form arrives, and the shape becomes visible. There is a specific kind of phone call that reveals the architecture of a life faster than any financial statement. It happens in a hospital. A man is admitted. Maybe it is chest pain. Maybe it is a fall. Maybe it is something found during a routine scan that turns out to be less routine than expected. He is in a bed. He is wearing a gown. His wallet is in a plastic bag in a drawer. His phone is on the tray table. And a nurse or an admissions coordinator asks the question that every hospital asks within the first hour. Is there someone we should call? Not Do you have insurance? That has been handled. Not what medications are you on? That has been logged. The question is relational. It is asking whether another human being exists who should know that this man is in this bed, in this gown, in this building right now. He gives a name, his brother. The brother is surprised because the man in the bed is not the kind of man who ends up in hospitals. He is the kind of man who goes to annual physicals and follows up on referrals and manages his own health the way he manages his finances, competently, quietly. But now intervention is required, and the brother on the other end of the phone does not know his medications, does not know his allergies beyond what was once mentioned in passing, does not know the name of his primary care physician, does not know whether he has a living will or a healthcare proxy, does not know where the insurance cards are filed, or whether there is a secondary policy, or what the deductible is. The brother knows one thing, that he was called, that he is, apparently, the closest available contact for a man whose life has been organized with extraordinary precision, but whose organizational system is accessible to exactly one person, and that person is currently connected to a heart monitor. This happens in hospitals across the country every day. A man arrives alone. A man is treated alone. His medical decisions are made by staff who have known him for 45 minutes because no one in the building has known him longer. The power of attorney he never signed means that if he becomes unable to communicate, the hospital follows its own protocols. The healthcare directive he never filed means his preferences about resuscitation, intubation, and life support are unknown. The financial power of attorney he never executed means that if his hospital stay extends past 30 days, his bills at home go unpaid. The passwords are in his head or in a notebook in his desk at home, which no one has a key to because no one needed a key because he was always there, until he was not. The hospital scenario is the clearest illustration, but it is not the only one. There is a less dramatic version that is in some ways more revealing because it does not involve emergency. It involves erosion. A man in his late 50s develops a condition that requires daily management. Nothing life-threatening, something chronic, a blood pressure issue, a thyroid disorder, a joint problem that limits mobility on certain days. He manages it. Of course, he manages it. That is what he does. He reads the literature. He adjusts his diet. He fills the prescriptions. He tracks the symptoms in a notebook or an app. But on the days when the condition flares, the rest of the system does not pause. The bills still arrive. The investment accounts still require attention during volatile markets. The house still needs the thing it needs. And the man who handles all of this is handling it with reduced capacity. Not incapacity, reduced capacity, slower processing, less patience for paperwork, a shorter window of concentration before fatigue takes over. In a shared household, these tasks distribute. One person handles the medical appointments, while the other handles the insurance claims. The system has slack built into it. The load is architecturally distributed across more than one operator. In his household, there is no slack. Every task routes through the same processor. And when the processor slows down, the entire system slows down. A statement goes unreviewed. A premium notice gets buried. A tax deadline approaches with less preparation than usual. Small gaps, manageable gaps. But gaps that would not exist if the system had a second channel. He notices this the way an engineer notices a bearing that has started to wear, not a failure. A leading indicator. During those days or weeks in the hospital, the system does not stop needing operation. The mortgage payment still auto-drafts, but only if the checking account has been funded, and if the account that funds it requires a manual transfer, the transfer does not happen. The insurance premium is due. A notice arrives from a creditor that is actually a duplicate, but no one is there to verify that. The mail accumulates. The email accumulates. The automated systems continue their automated functions, but the non-automated ones, the ones that depend on his judgment and his presence at the keyboard, those begin to drift. 4 days is manageable. 2 weeks creates gaps. A month creates real exposure. And during that month, no one has the authority to act on his behalf. No healthcare proxy. No durable power of attorney. No designated agent. No one with legal standing to access his accounts, pay his bills, or manage his property. An attorney will have to be involved. A court proceeding initiated. Guardianship established. This takes time and money, and a person willing to step forward and petition the court. And all of this could have been avoided by signing 3 documents. A durable power of attorney, a healthcare proxy, a will with a named successor, 3 documents, an afternoon with an attorney, a few names on a few lines. He has not done it. And here is where the examination needs to move from mechanics to something more interior. Because the reason he has not done it is not what the estate planning brochures assume. The brochures assume procrastination. They assume people simply forget, or are too busy, or find the topic unpleasant. And for most people, that is accurate enough. But for this man, the reason runs deeper than avoidance of an unpleasant afternoon. The reason is that every one of those forms requires him to do something his entire adult life was designed to make unnecessary. Ask someone for something. Specifically, ask someone to take responsibility for him, to stand in his place, to act on his behalf, to manage what he has always managed alone. For a man whose identity was built on the fact that he does not require this, the forms are not paperwork. They are a confrontation with the boundary of an operating principle he has lived inside for 30 years. And the confrontation has a specific emotional architecture beneath it. Not the emotions the culture expects. Not loneliness, not sadness, not self-pity, something colder, something structural. A set of fears that do not present themselves as fears because they are dressed in the language of preference and independence and rational self-management. The first fear is this: that naming someone on the form makes the absence permanent. As long as the line is blank, the situation is temporary. It is something he has not gotten around to, something he will address eventually. The blank line preserves the fiction that the answer is pending, that the structure is still forming, that the life has not yet finalized its shape. Writing a brother's name or a nephew's name or a charity's, Name on the beneficiary line does not just designate a recipient. It concedes that the recipient he once imagined, the wife, the partner, the person who would appear on this line without deliberation, is not coming. The pen hovering over the line is the last position in which that concession has not been made. The second fear is subtler. It is the fear that the system, once opened, reveals itself to be smaller than he thought. For 30 years, the filing cabinet and the accounts and the meticulous organization have functioned as evidence. Evidence of a well-managed life. Evidence that the choices he made were sound. Evidence that discipline and restraint and self-reliance produce real, measurable results. The system told him in numbers that he had done this right. But the system was only ever evaluated by one person, him. Inviting a second person inside, even for the limited purpose of emergency designation, risks a second evaluation. And the second evaluation might see something the first evaluator could not failure. Something worse, smallness. A life that was efficient but narrow. A system that was organized but contained nothing that another person would recognize as urgent enough to preserve. He does not think this in explicit terms. No man sits at a kitchen table and says to himself, "I am afraid that my life is smaller than my balance sheet suggests." But the fear operates below language. It operates in the hesitation, in the 3-week delay in returning the forms, in the decision to stack the pension packet under the electric bill and deal with it later. The fear does not announce itself. It expresses itself as deferral. The third fear is the most practical and therefore the easiest to admit, though he rarely does. It is the fear that the person he names will not do it well, that the brother who does not understand the filing system will make decisions that contradict everything the system was built to protect, that the nephew who has never managed a portfolio will liquidate the investments at the wrong time, that the friend who agreed to serve as executor will find the task overwhelming and hand it to an attorney who will charge fees that erode the estate the man spent 30 years building. This fear is rational. It is based on observation. He has watched other estates get mismanaged. He has seen the cost. And so the fear converts itself into a reason. I have not named someone because I have not found the right person, which sounds like prudence, which feels like prudence, which functions in practice as permanent deferral. These 3 fears, the fear of finality, the fear of exposure, and the fear of mismanagement, form a structure. They reinforce each other. The fear of finality prevents him from choosing. The fear of exposure prevents him from sharing. The fear of mismanagement prevents him from delegating. And together, they produce exactly the condition they are designed to prevent. Not the preservation of options, the elimination of them. Because a man who will not designate, will not share, and will not delegate is a man whose system dies with him, which is the outcome all 3 fears are ostensibly trying to avoid. A man governed by fear is not how he would describe himself. Careful, that is his word. A man who takes his time, who does not rush into decisions. And those descriptions are accurate. But they are also the surface language for a deeper structure that has been running beneath his decisions for years. The care is real. The caution is real. The fear is also real, and the fear wears the care like a uniform. He knows this, not in the way a person knows something they have confronted, in the way a person knows something they have noticed and then set aside. The way he knows the gutter on the north side of the house has a slight sag he should address. The way he knows the tire on the truck is getting close to replacement. The awareness is present, but categorized as non-urgent, filed under eventually. And eventually, for a man with a well-functioning present tense, can last a very long time. But the awareness does surface. It surfaces at specific moments. When a coworker retires and the office throws a party, and the retiree's spouse is there, and the speech mentions their plans together. When a friend's parent dies, and the friend talks about settling the estate, and how complicated it was even with a will, even with children who helped. He listens to those stories and performs a quiet internal calculation. If it was that complicated with a full support structure, what would it look like without one? He does not share the calculation. He absorbs it, noted, acknowledged, unresolved. The irony is precise. The independence that protected him from financial vulnerability now prevents him from creating operational continuity, the same trait, performing opposite functions at different stages of the same life. And nobody tells him this. Not directly, not in a way that lands. The financial advisor mentions estate planning in the abstract. The attorney who handled the house closing offered to draft a will. The doctor's office asks about advance directives on the intake form, and he leaves those lines blank too, because they are the same lines. Different form, same question. Same absence. The people around him do not push. They do not push because he does not appear to need pushing. He appears, from every external vantage point, to be a man who has things handled. And he does have things handled. In the present tense, under current conditions, with himself at the controls. The problem is not present tense. The problem is future tense. And the future tense, for a man who has successfully managed the present for 30 years, does not feel urgent. It feels abstract, like something that applies to other people, people who are less organized. The men who are most likely to need operational redundancy in their financial lives are the men who are least likely to build it. Because the same traits that produce the discipline produce the resistance to shared control. And the resistance to shared control is the gap through which the entire system falls when the operator is no longer available. He has built his life on a cliff he cannot see because he has been standing on it successfully for so long that the ground feels permanent. There is a man in Ohio, 61 years old. He worked for a manufacturing company for 28 years and then took early retirement when the plant restructured. He has a pension, a 401k that rolled into an IRA, Social Security that he has not yet claimed because he knows the math and waiting makes sense. A house with no mortgage, a truck with no loan, savings in a credit union. He is comfortable, not wealthy in the way that gets attention, comfortable in the way that means nothing is pressing. The furnace works, the truck runs, the groceries get bought, the life proceeds. He has no wife, never had one. He came close once, But it did not happen, and the reasons belong to him. The point is that he has now lived the majority of his adult life as a single man, and the financial structure he built during that time reflects the assumptions of a single operator working alone. A case study is not how he sees himself. A demographic statistic is not how he sees himself. A man who made reasonable decisions and ended up here, that is how he sees himself. The here is not bad. It is just specific. 20 million men over 50 in the United States have never been married. The number has grown steadily for decades. It is not a fringe category. It is a population large enough to fill a mid-sized country. And within that population, a significant subset has done what this man has done: built financial stability without building relational succession. The financial planning industry sees these men occasionally. They show up in advisor offices, usually in their 50s or 60s, prompted by a specific event: a health scare, a friend's death, a retirement calculation that suddenly feels real. They sit across from the advisor, and the advisor pulls up the accounts, and the accounts look fine. The numbers are fine. The allocation is fine. And then the advisor asks the question: who is your beneficiary? Who has power of attorney? Who is the executor of your estate? And the conversation shifts, not into crisis, into a quieter kind of exposure. The man does not have answers, not because he has not thought about it, but because the answers require a relational infrastructure he does not have. The advisor can build a portfolio. The advisor can recommend a trust structure. The advisor can calculate withdrawal rates and Roth conversion ladders. What the advisor cannot do is supply the name. The name has to come from the life, and the life has not produced one. This is where the conversation about money becomes a conversation about something else entirely, not about returns or fees or market cycles, about witness. A witness, in the way I am using the word, is not a legal term. It is a structural one. A witness is a person who knows what the accumulation means, not what it is worth, what it means, what it was built to protect, what it was built to say about the man who built it. In a conventional household, the witness function is distributed across relationships. A wife knows why the savings account has a particular balance, because the balance represents the trip they planned or the cushion they agreed was necessary after the last emergency. A son knows why the brokerage account exists, because the father explained it during a conversation about investing. A daughter knows why the house matters, because she grew up in it, and the house is not just an asset, but a container for shared memory. The witness is the person who holds the narrative context around the numbers. The person who can say, he kept that account because it was his mother's money, and he never wanted to mix it with the rest. Or, he overfunded the emergency account because he lost a job in 2009 and it scared him. Or, he always said the house should go to someone who would actually live in it. Those sentences are not legal instruments, but they are the difference between an estate that gets administered and a life that gets continued, between assets that get liquidated and assets that get directed, between a filing cabinet that gets emptied into boxes and a filing cabinet that gets opened with understanding. There is a painting in his hallway. It is not valuable. He bought it at a yard sale 20 years ago because it reminded him of a lake in Michigan where his family went in the summers when he was a child. He knows why the painting is there. An appraiser would not. A brother cleaning out the house would not. The painting would be put in a donation pile or left on the curb because no one alive would know that it is not decor. It is a specific memory hung in a specific place by a man who looked at it every time he walked to the kitchen. That is what witness preserves. Not dollar values, context, the connective tissue between an object and its owner, between an account and its reason, between a life and the accumulation that grew alongside it. The man at the table does not have a witness, not in this sense. He has people who know him. He has people who care about him, but he does not have a person who holds the narrative context of his financial life. No one who has heard him say, even once, "This account is for this purpose, and if I am gone, here is what I want." He has not said it because he has never needed to say it. The system operated on internal logic, personal memory, private intention. And private intention, by definition, dies with the person who holds it. A collection of assets is not yet a life structure. Assets become a life structure when they are embedded in a narrative that someone other than the owner can read. Without that, the assets are accurate but silent. They describe a balance. They do not describe a life. Now move from witness to purpose, not in a philosophical sense, in a mechanical one. What was the accumulation for? For most of this man's financial life, the answer was embedded in the activity itself. The accumulation was for security, for stability, for not becoming dependent, for not becoming a problem, for proving that a man can live alone and manage alone without requiring the financial architecture of a partnership. That was a real purpose. It drove decisions. It shaped behavior. It organized decades of consistent action. But operating principles have a lifespan. They work until the conditions they were designed for are met. And the conditions have been met. He is secure. He is stable. He is not dependent. He has proven what needed proving. Now what? The money does not know what comes after security. The accounts do not know what comes after stability. The system achieved its objective, and then it kept running. No new objective replaced the old one. The system simply has no mechanism for stopping. Contribute, save, invest, rebalance, review, repeat. The cycle is self-sustaining. It does not require a reason to continue. It continues because continuing is what it does. And so the money grows past the point of functional necessity. The emergency fund is funded well beyond 9 months. The retirement accounts are projected to last well past actuarial expectations. The system has produced a surplus, a genuine surplus, and the surplus has no assignment. A man with a family has built-in destinations for surplus. College funds, home improvements, family vacations, gifts to children, investments in the next generation. The money has places to go because the life has people to go to. A man without those destinations accumulates surplus the way a reservoir fills when the discharge valve is closed. The level rises. The capacity is there. Nothing overflows. but the water has nowhere to move. And the weight, over time, changes the character of the structure. What began as prudent saving becomes ambient excess. What began as responsible preparation becomes stockpiling without endpoint. What began as security becomes insulation so thick that the man inside, he can no longer feel the edges of his own life. He is not hoarding. Hoarding implies disorder. His finances are ordered. Hoarding implies compulsion. His saving is deliberate, but the accumulation has outlived its original purpose, and no new purpose has taken its place. This affects him in the present, not just in the abstract future. He oversaves. Saving is the default action, and no alternative action has presented itself. The money that could be spent on experience, on contribution, on engagement with the world, stays in the account. Spending requires a narrative. It requires a reason. And the reason he has been using for decades, I need this for security, no longer applies with the same force. But no new reason has replaced it. He underspends, not in a way that causes deprivation. He eats well. He maintains his home. But there is a layer of spending he does not access. The trip he has not taken. He has thought about it, northern Italy, or maybe the Pacific coast of Oregon, or maybe Iceland. He has researched it online, bookmarked a few sites, looked at prices. The money is there. The time is there, especially since he retired early. But the trip does not get booked, not because of the cost, because a trip for one requires a particular kind of self-authorization that his system never developed. His system developed an entitlement to security. Security and enjoyment are different currencies, and he never learned to spend the second one. There is a moment, sometimes on a Sunday evening, when the weekend closes without event and the week ahead opens without variation, when he feels something he does not have a word for. It is not sadness. It is not loneliness. It is closer to a brief awareness of pattern. The recognition that this Sunday evening is structurally identical to the one before it, and the one before that, and the one 8 years ago. The recognition arrives, stays for a few minutes, and leaves. He does not dwell on it. He does not act on it. He turns on the television or checks the portfolio or reads something online, and the recognition folds itself back into the background. But the recognition is cumulative, like the money. Each Sunday evening adds a thin layer to an awareness he does not regularly examine. The awareness that the life is repeating rather than developing. That the system is cycling rather than advancing. That the surplus is growing while the life it was built to support remains at the same scale it has occupied for years. The kitchen has not been renovated. He has the money. He has the time. He has lived with the same laminate countertops and the same fluorescent fixture for 19 years. He has noticed other kitchens. He has thought about what his could look like. But the renovation does not happen. The kitchen is functional, and in his system, functional is the standard. Functional is what the money was built to guarantee. Anything beyond functional requires a justification the system does not provide. Who is the kitchen for? Who else will use it? What is the return on the investment if the only person eating at the counter is the same person who has been eating at the counter for 19 years. The money waits for a direction that has not been declared, and in the waiting, it compounds. And in the compounding, it confirms the appearance of a system that is working. And the confirmation obscures the question, because a rising balance looks like progress, and progress looks like purpose. And purpose is precisely the thing that is missing. When money has no narrative role beyond protection, it can continue growing long after it has stopped answering the real question. The real question is not how much is enough. The financial planning industry loves that question because it has calculable answers. Withdrawal rates, replacement ratios, Monte Carlo simulations. The industry can model enough with precision. But enough for what is a different question. It does not respond to Monte Carlo. It is not a function of withdrawal rates or inflation assumptions. It is a function of meaning. And meaning is not a financial product. He passed how much years ago? He is sitting in the territory of what for? And the silence that follows that question is not the silence of financial insecurity. It is the silence of a life that secured everything except the answer. There is a pattern that forms when accumulation operates without declared purpose over a long enough timeline. It is not dramatic. It does not look like dysfunction from the outside. It looks like discipline. But inside the pattern, something circular has developed. Earn, save, invest, protect, review, repeat. The cycle feeds itself. Each quarter's review confirms that the system is working. Each year's tax return shows growth. And growth in this system is the only metric. More saved, more invested, more protected. The metric never changes. Because the metric never changes, the behavior never changes. Because the behavior never changes, the question of what the accumulation is for never gets forced. The cycle absorbs the question. It converts what for into how much and answers how much with more. And more feels like a purpose. It feels like direction. But it is not forward motion. It is orbital motion. A loop that returns to its own starting point with a larger balance and the same unanswered question. He notices, not all at once, in fragments. In the flatness of a quarterly review that used to feel engaging and now feels rote. In the awareness, never fully articulated, that he has been saving for something, and the something has never been named. He notices the way a man notices a sound that has been running in the background for years, not because the sound changed, because one afternoon the sound becomes audible, and once it is audible, it does not become inaudible again. The sound is the question, what is this for? And the question, once heard, changes the character of the accumulation. Not its reality, its character. The money is still real. The discipline is still real. But the meaning of the money has become uncertain, not because something was lost, because something was noticed. And noticing, for a man who has built his life on decisive action and clear management, is an uncomfortable state. He is not a man who sits with uncertainty. He is a man who resolves uncertainty. He identifies the problem. He evaluates the options. He selects the best option. He implements it. He monitors the result. That is how the financial life was built. But this is not a problem that yields to that sequence, because the problem is not in the accounts. The problem is in the space between the accounts and the life, the gap between what the money does and what the money means. And that gap cannot be closed by analysis or execution. It can only be closed by declaration, by saying, in some form that exists outside his own head, what the money is for now that the original purpose has been fulfilled. Declaration requires an audience, not a large one, not a public one, but a real one. Someone to receive the declaration, someone to hold it. The loop closes by opening, by letting something out of the system that has been sealed inside it. Now hold that recognition and move forward in time, past the quarterly reviews, past the form on the table, past the system operating under his control. Move to the point that he does not like to think about, but that thinks about him. The point where the operator exits, not temporarily, permanently. What happens next is not a guess. It is a documented process. It has been observed in thousands of estates. It has been handled by attorneys and probate clerks and county administrators who have processed the remains of lives that were financially sound but structurally undirected. A man dies in his apartment, in a hospital, on the floor of his kitchen. The specifics vary. What does not vary is what follows. The body is found by whoever finds it. A neighbor who noticed the mail, a coworker who noticed the absence, a brother who could not reach him by phone. The finding takes hours or days, or in some cases longer, because the man's routine was solitary, and his absence does not trigger immediate alarm in a world that is accustomed to him being quietly on his own. The authorities are called. The death is confirmed. The body is taken to a funeral home, pending instructions. Pending instructions from whom? This is the first question that reveals the architecture. If there is a will, there is an executor. If there is no will, there is a petition. Someone must go to the probate court and ask to be appointed personal representative of the estate. This requires knowing the man well enough to have standing. A relative, a creditor, someone. The court appoints, and the process begins. The appointed person enters the house. This is the moment the private life becomes an object of interpretation by a person who is never inside it. The house is clean. The bills are on the counter, some opened, some not. The refrigerator contains what a single man's refrigerator contains: condiments, a few staples. Something expired in the back. The bed is made or unmade, depending on the day. The dishes are done. The trash is not full. The filing cabinet is in the office. The appointed person opens it. Inside, green hanging folders labeled in the dead man's handwriting. Tax returns, statements, policies. The records are meticulous. The organization is clear. The person standing in front of the cabinet can see that this man was careful, that this man paid attention, that this man treated his financial life with a level of seriousness and precision that most people never achieve. And the person does not know what any of it means. A Roth IRA statement shows a balance. The person does not know why the man chose a Roth over a traditional. The brokerage account shows holdings. The person does not know why those specific funds were selected. The savings account shows a balance that seems high for a checking alternative. The person does not know that the man kept that account at that specific amount because it represented exactly 14 months of expenses, and he had arrived at 14 months through a calculation he performed once in 2011 after reading an article about unemployment duration for men over 50. The person does not know this because the man never told anyone. The calculation lived in his head. The rationale lived in his head. The entire interpretive framework that connected the numbers to the life lived in his head. And the head is gone. The laptop is on the desk. It is password protected. The person does not know the password. The email accounts, the brokerage logins, the bank access, the utility autopay configurations, all of it lives behind that password. An IT service can crack it, eventually, for a fee. Another expense drawn from the estate. The phone is in the drawer, also locked. The contacts inside it, the people who might have additional information, are inaccessible. The text messages, which might contain recent conversations about the man's intentions or wishes, are inaccessible. The photos, which might tell someone something about what the man valued, what he spent his time looking at, what he returned to when no one was watching, are behind a screen that reflects the face of a stranger. The personal effects are cataloged. A watch, a set of tools. A collection of something, books or records or fishing reels, that clearly mattered to the man who collected them. The person cataloging does not know which items have sentimental value and which are just objects. A hired appraiser will come later and assign dollar values based on resale potential. The fishing reel the man bought on a trip with his father in 1987 will be appraised at $12. The book his mother gave him, inscribed, will be appraised at nothing because used books have no market. These objects, which held position in a man's interior life, will be converted to their liquidation value by someone who never heard the stories they carried. This is not cruelty, it is logistics. It is what happens when a life's material output has no declared narrative attached to it. The objects become inventory. The accounts become assets under administration. The house becomes real property to be sold or distributed. The man's entire financial life, built over 3 decades of disciplined attention, is processed by a system that treats all uninstructed estates the same way, efficiently, impersonally, according to statute. The money does not disappear. It gets redistributed, but the redistribution has nothing to do with the man who earned it, saved it, managed it, and sat at a kitchen table one afternoon unable to name the person it was all for. Estates intestacy laws apply. The court distributes according to a formula. The brother gets a share. A distant relative gets a share. The formula does not know that the man barely spoke to one of them and would have given his entire estate to the other. The formula does not ask. The email account remains active for a while. Automated messages continue to arrive. Quarterly statements. Promotional offers from companies that do not know their customer is dead. A renewal notice from a magazine he subscribed to. A reminder from the dentist about a cleaning scheduled for next month. The digital life of a deceased man does not know it is the digital life of a deceased man. It continues performing its functions in a world that has already moved on. The neighbor notices the lawn growing. The neighbor wonders whether to mow it. The neighbor does not know who to call. The neighbor mows it once, out of respect, and then stops, because it is not his responsibility, and the line between kindness and liability is unclear when no one is in charge. The truck sits in the driveway. The registration expires. A notice arrives in the mail that no one reads. Eventually, the truck is towed or sold at auction. The man who maintained it, who changed its oil on schedule and replaced the brake pads before they wore through, and washed it on Sunday mornings because that was part of the routine. The man who knew the truck the way he knew his own body, by its sounds and its rhythms and its small failures that he caught before they became large ones. That man's relationship to the truck is now reduced to a vague number on a transfer form. And the filing cabinet, the meticulous green folder filing cabinet that represented 30 years of careful work, it's emptied into boxes. The boxes go into the brothers' garage. 6 months later, they go to the curb. That is the end of a financially sound, structurally undirected life. Not because the man was negligent, because the man was private, because the man was self-sufficient, because the man managed everything himself and told no one and left no instructions and carried the entire architecture of his life in a mind that was not permanent. The cruelest detail is this: the system that processes his estate will be more impersonal than any system he ever operated. He was meticulous. The probate process is procedural. He made decisions based on knowledge and care. The court makes decisions based on statute and efficiency. He spent 30 years building a structure that reflected who he was. The administrative process that dismantles it will reflect nothing about who he was. It will reflect the default rules of the state in which he died. The distance between those two systems, the one he built and the one that replaces it, is the distance between authorship and administration, between intention and default, between a man who cared deeply about his own financial architecture and an institution that does not know the architecture existed. That distance could have been closed by a will, by a trust, by a conversation, by a name on a line. Now return to the living version of this man, the one at the table, the one with the pen, the one who is not dead, who is not sick, who is not in a hospital bed, the one who is simply sitting in his kitchen on a Wednesday afternoon with a form that is asking him a question. He knows, at some level below the spreadsheets and the quarterly statements, what happens if he does not answer it. He has seen it. He has watched relatives' estates get processed by strangers. He has heard the stories. He knows that the careful system he built, the system that has been his primary achievement and his primary companion, will be disassembled by people who cannot read it. And here is the structural confrontation that lives at the center of this examination. The system was not built for legacy. It was not built for transfer. It was not built for a future audience. It was built for him, for his security, for his stability, for his present tense operation, and it performed that function perfectly. But a system built only for its operator is a system that exists only as long as its operator exists. And the operator, like all operators, has an expiration. Not metaphorical, biological, certain, coming. This is the thing that the quarterly statements do not say. The thing the balance sheet does not reflect. The thing the financial advisor's software cannot model. The system is running out of operator before it runs out of money. He has more years of funded retirement than he has years of guaranteed cognition. He has more money in the accounts than he has certainty that the mind managing the accounts will remain sharp enough to manage them. The actuarial tables say he may live to 85 or 90. The neurological statistics say cognitive decline begins, in many cases, before that. The money is projected forward on a clean curve. The operator's capacity is projected forward on a curve that no Monte Carlo simulation wants to draw. He knows this abstractly. Every man over 50 knows this abstractly. But the knowledge lives in the same category as the beneficiary form, acknowledged, deferred, filed under eventually. The deferral is easier because the present tense is still clear. He still manages the accounts. He still reads the statements. He still makes decisions. The system still runs at full capacity. And a system running at full capacity does not feel like a system approaching its limit. It feels like a system that will run forever, which is the one thing no system does. He has insured against market risk. He has insured against health emergencies. He has insured against job loss and property damage and liability. He has hedged against every external threat his mind could model. But the one risk he has not hedged against is the one that makes all the others moot. The risk that he stops being here, or the subtler risk. The risk that he is still here, but is no longer fully himself. The risk that the operator remains at the controls, but can no longer read the instruments accurately. That the man at the table is still sitting at the table, but can no longer remember why the Roth was funded before the traditional, or what the savings account balance is supposed to represent. That scenario is not death. It is not catastrophe. It is the ordinary, unremarkable, statistically probable erosion of the one resource the entire system depends on. And the system, which was brilliant at protecting him from every other risk, has no instructions for this one. That is not a personal failure. It is the logical endpoint of a design philosophy that optimized for one user. The design was sound within its parameters. The parameters were too narrow. Financial success is not the final proof of a coherent life system. It may be only one component that never found its place in a larger design. And the larger design, the one that includes continuity and witness and declared purpose, is the one this man has not yet built, not because he cannot, because the one he built was so good at its job that it never felt incomplete from the inside. The light in the kitchen has shifted. The afternoon has moved. The pension packet is still on the table. The pen is still where he left it. The refrigerator cycles off, and the room becomes genuinely silent for a moment. The kind of silence that only happens in a house with one person in it. Then the compressor kicks back on. The hum returns. The form waits. He is still here. The system is still his. The filing cabinet is still organized. The accounts are still funded. Everything that can be decided by one man at one table on one afternoon is still available to be decided. There is a temptation at this point to suggest that all of this can be fixed, that the man at the table simply needs to complete the forms, sign the documents, name the names, and the structural gap closes. That temptation should be resisted, not because designation is wrong. Designation is necessary. But the narrative that says identify the problem, implement the fix, move on, does not account for what has happened over 30 years of solitary financial operation. The gap is not only in the paperwork. The gap is in the architecture of identity. A man does not spend 3 decades as his own sole financial authority and then, on a Wednesday afternoon, become comfortable with shared legibility. The shift is real. It is available. But it is not instant. And pretending it is instant disrespects the depth of the structure that built the life. So the reconstruction, if it happens on his terms, not on a therapist's timeline, not on an advisor's checklist, on his terms, which means it starts with something he already knows how to do. Classify. He is a man who classifies things. He classifies expenses. He classifies investments. He classifies risks. He has spent his entire adult life sorting the world into categories and managing each category with appropriate attention. This is not a new skill. It is an existing skill applied to a new domain. The domain is this. What does the money stand guard over? What should continue if he cannot continue it? What deserves designation? What is stewardship and what is surplus? The categories are not complicated. They are not grand. They are structural. Essential continuity. What must keep running if he is not available to run it? Which bills? Which policies? Which accounts? Who needs the passwords? Who needs access to the filing cabinet? This is not glamorous work. It is the most basic form of translation, making the machinery readable to a second operator. Chosen beneficiaries, the line on the form, the name or names that designate where the assets go, not by default, not by statute, by his decision, made while the pen is in his hand and the choice is still his. The name does not need to be perfect. That is worth saying plainly. Perfection is the enemy of designation. A man who waits for the perfect name will die with a blank line. A man who writes a reasonable name, a name he can change later if circumstances change, that man has done something the blank line could never do. Direction is revisable. Blankness is not. Purposeful deployment, the harder category. The one that asks not just who gets it, but what should it do? A scholarship, a donation, a trust for a specific purpose, an investment in a nephew's education. This category does not apply to every man. But for men with surplus past their needs, it is the category where accumulation finally connects to something beyond its own growth. There is a man in Virginia who did this. He is 57, an electrician, never married. He had the same filing cabinet, the same blank forms, the same 3-year deferral on the estate planning. And then a friend his age had a stroke. The friend survived, but the weeks that followed, The scramble for authority, the locked accounts, the family arguments about decisions no one had standing to make. The friend lying in a bed while his financial life drifted without an operator. Those weeks changed something in the electrician. Not dramatically. He did not have an epiphany. He did not undergo a transformation. He called an attorney. He made an appointment. He sat in the office and answered the questions the forms had been asking for years. The attorney asked who should make his medical decisions if he could not. He named his sister. That was the dignity question, not about weakness, about control. Specifically, the control to determine who speaks for him when he cannot speak for himself. Without that document, a judge who has never met him decides. That is not dignity. That is abdication by omission. The attorney asked who should manage his finances if he were incapacitated. He named his nephew. That was the authority question, not giving away control. Extending control past the point of personal availability. The difference between a system that stops when the operator stops and a system that continues under authorized direction. He selects the person. He defines the scope. He retains the right to revoke. That is not dependence. That is engineering with a redundancy layer. He named a friend as the executor of his will. He updated his beneficiary designations on the retirement accounts and the life insurance policy. The attorney asked about a trust. He said he would think about it. The attorney asked about charitable intentions. He said he would think about that too. He did not try to resolve everything in one sitting. He resolved the urgent structural layer, the documents that would keep his system running if he went to the hospital tomorrow. The appointment took 90 minutes. The documents were ready in a week. He signed them on a Tuesday morning and went to work. He described it later to the friend who had recovered from the stroke. He said it felt like turning in an assignment that had been sitting on his desk for years. Not emotional, not cathartic, just done. The relief was not dramatic. It was administrative. The same quiet satisfaction he felt when he filed his taxes early or when the inspection passed on a job site. A thing that needed doing was now done. And then there was the sixth category, the one the attorney did not ask about, the one no form addresses. Controlled release, the permission to spend, to use the money while he is still here to use it, to take the trip, to renovate the kitchen, to buy the better tools, to stop treating every dollar as a sentry guarding against catastrophe and start treating some of those dollars as evidence that the man is still alive and still allowed to live inside his own life, not just manage it from the perimeter. This is harder than it sounds. For 30 years, the emotional reward of his financial life came from accumulation. Watching the balance rise, each statement confirmed that he was doing the right thing. Spending reverses that signal. Spending makes the number go down. And a number going down in his system has always meant something is wrong. The retraining is not about becoming careless. It is about recognizing that the emergency he was saving against has not arrived and may never arrive, and that the money sitting in the account while he sits in a kitchen he stopped noticing is not protecting him. It is outliving him in advance. The money is already in the future. He is still in the present. And the present is where the kitchen is. and the trip is, and the fishing rod, and the concert, and the meal at the restaurant he has walked past 100 times. Controlled release is not recklessness. It is the recognition that a man who has saved enough and still has surplus has earned the right to stop, deferring participation in his own existence. These are not failures of financial planning. They are acts of presence. And presence, for a man who has spent 3 decades planning for the future, is the most radical reallocation he can make. But something else happened that he did not expect, and that he mentioned only in passing, as though it were not important. When he gave his sister the folder with copies of the documents, and walked her through the accounts, and explained the filing system, and told her where the passwords were stored, she listened. She took notes. She asked questions. And at the end, she said, "Okay, I've got it." 3 words, ordinary words. But he sat with them for a while afterward, because no one had ever said that to him before. Not about his finances, not about his life. No one had ever looked at the system he built and said, "I understand it. I can carry it." He had been the only one who could say that for 30 years. And the transfer of that capacity, even partial, even limited, even just to one person for the purpose of emergency continuity, changed something about the weight he had been carrying. Not the financial weight, the interpretive weight, the burden of being the sole mind that understood the life. It is a strange kind of isolation, that particular burden. Not the condition of having no one to eat dinner with. Something more specific. The condition of knowing something about your own life that no other person on earth knows. A language spoken by one. He had carried it so long it felt like the weight of his own skeleton. Part of the structure. Immovable. And then his sister said 3 words, and some fraction of the weight shifted. Not onto her, into a shared space between them. A space that did not exist before the folder was handed over. He did not become a different man. He is still an electrician. He is still single. He still lives alone. He still manages his own finances. He still operates the system. But the system now has a second reader. One person who can open the cabinet and make sense of what is inside. One person who knows not everything, but enough. That is not a love story. It is not a redemption arc. It is a man handing a folder to his sister on a Tuesday and feeling, for the first time in decades, that the structure he built could survive him. Some absences remain absences. That should be said clearly. The life that was lived alone was lived alone. The decades without a partner were decades without a partner. The holidays in a quiet house were in a quiet house. Designation does not retroactively populate the past with experiences that were not had. It does not convert solitude into companionship. It does not transform a private life into a shared one. What it does is make the private life legible, readable, continuable. It takes the system that was sealed inside one man's awareness and opens it just enough for another person to see inside. Not everything inside, just the operational layer, the accounts, the intentions, the directions. That is structurally sufficient. And for a man who has built his life on structure, structural sufficiency is the ground he knows how to stand on. The rest, the emotional dimension, the existential dimension, The question of whether the life was meaningful or wasted or somewhere in between, that is his to carry. No form resolves it. No attorney addresses it. It lives in the space between the man and his own understanding of what he has done with his time. And that space is private, appropriately private. But the structural layer does need to be disclosed, because that is the layer where the accumulation either continues to speak for the man or falls silent. And silence, in the structural sense, is not peace. It is confusion. It is probate. It is the slow administrative dissolution of a life that was built with intention, but left without instruction. Quiet reconstruction begins when accumulation stops being treated as self-explanatory and starts being assigned a clear place in the life it came from. The man is still at the table, the same afternoon light, the same pension packet, the same IRA update, the same yellow sticky note from the bank. The refrigerator still runs. The filing cabinet still holds its organized contents. The account statements still confirm decades of correct decisions. Nothing in the room has changed, but the man holding the pen is sitting inside a different version of the question than he was 2 hours ago. The question is the same. Primary beneficiary, full legal name, relationship to account holder. The words have not moved. The blank line has not filled itself. What has changed is the space around the question. It extends past the form, past the accounts, past the filing cabinet, past the house and the insurance and the pension and the IRA. The question is no longer just about who gets the money. It is about whether the money and the life that produced it has been given a structure that can outlast the man who built it. He built well. The discipline was real. The accumulation was real. The order was genuine, and the restraint was genuine, and the competence was earned through years of quiet, unwitnessed effort. No one handed him a system. He constructed one, piece by piece, decision by decision, year by year, alone. That word does not carry the weight it is often assigned. Alone is not a diagnosis. For this man, alone was a method. It was the condition under which the system operated most efficiently. No negotiations, no compromises, no competing priorities. The financial life ran clean because it ran through a single decision maker with clear principles and consistent execution. The method worked. The results are spread across the table, statements showing growth, policies showing coverage, records showing continuity, a life measured in financial terms that any advisor would describe as well managed. But well managed and well narrated are different achievements. A man can manage his finances without narrating them. He can accumulate without explaining. He can protect without declaring what he is protecting. He can build without naming who the building is for. The management asks only for competence. The narration asks for something else. It asks for authorship, for a stated relationship between the money and the life, for a sentence written somewhere that says what this was all about. He has not written that sentence yet. The system never required the words. It required contributions and allocations and rebalancing and tax-efficient withdrawals. It required numbers. It did not require narrative, and so the narrative went unwritten, the way a letter goes unwritten when no one asks for it. The intention may exist. The content may be clear in the mind of the person who would write it, but without a recipient, the letter stays internal, a draft that never becomes a document. The beneficiary form is the prompt, the institutional version of someone saying, "Write it down." Not everything, not the whole life, just this one line, this one name that converts an internal intention into an external fact. That takes the money from self-referential loop to directed instrument. That breaks the seal on a system that has been closed for 30 years. But the form and the documents that follow it, the will, the trust, the power of attorney, these are the structural layer. They are necessary, they are achievable, they are within his skill set. There is a layer beneath the structural one, and it is worth naming, even if it cannot be resolved by a form. The layer is this: what was the time for? Not the money. The time, the years. The mornings and the afternoons and the evenings and the weekends. The 30 years of Saturdays. The meals. The drives. The quiet hours in rooms where no one else was present. The accumulation of days that were not invested in accounts, but spent in the currency of being alive. The money has a record. The time does not. The money has statements. The time has no statements. The money can be measured. The time has already passed. And the question that sits beneath the beneficiary line, beneath the asset allocation, beneath the entire financial architecture, is whether the time spent building the system was time well spent, not by financial metrics. By the metric a man uses when he is sitting alone at a table and the afternoon is quiet and the question is simple enough to hurt. This is not a question that invites self-pity. He has no interest in self-pity. He has no patience for it. The question is structural, the way all his questions are structural. He built a system. The system consumed time. The time produced the results in the filing cabinet. Were the results sufficient to account for the time? The financial answer is yes. The accounts are full. The house is paid for. The retirement is funded. But there is another ledger, an unwritten one. The ledger of experiences not had. The ledger of conversations not initiated. The ledger of Tuesday evenings that passed in the same configuration as every other Tuesday evening for 15 years. The ledger of mornings when the coffee was good and the house was quiet and the day opened like every other day and closed like every other day and became not a memory, but a unit in a sequence that has no distinguishing marks. He does not regret. That is the wrong frame. Regret implies a clear alternative that was visible at the time and rejected. The alternatives were not always visible. Sometimes they were visible and impractical. Sometimes they were visible and frightening. Sometimes they were not visible at all because the system was running smoothly, and a running system does not generate alternatives. It generates continuity, but the awareness of the unwritten ledger is there. It sits beside the financial ledger. It does not cancel the financial ledger. It complicates it. It asks the financial ledger to account for more than dollars, to account for mornings, for afternoons, for years. He cannot answer that question today. He may never fully answer it. It is the kind of question that does not resolve. It deepens. It accompanies a man through the decades rather than concluding in a specific year. And the fact that it remains open is not a failure. It is evidence of a mind that has not stopped thinking. A man who has stopped asking what the time was for is a man who is settled. And this man, whatever else is true about him, has not settled. He is still at the table. He is still holding the pen. The answer to the financial question is available. He can write a name. He can sign the documents. He can make the system legible. He can assign the accumulation a direction that survives him. The answer to the existential question is not available in the same way. It does not fit on a form. It does not resolve with a signature. It lives in the ongoing act of deciding each day what the remaining time is for, not the remaining money. The remaining time and the decision is his. It has always been his. That is the double edge of the autonomy he built. No one tells him what to do with his time, and no one tells him what to do with his time. But the structural question and the existential question are not unrelated. They meet at the beneficiary line, because the act of writing a name, of giving the money a destination, is also an act of declaring that the life that produced the money had a direction, even if the direction is imperfect, even if the direction is partial, even if the direction is nothing more than, I want this to go to someone specific, chosen by me, for reasons I understand, even if no one else fully does. That is authorship, not grand authorship, not the kind that produces memoirs or monuments, the quiet kind, the kind that fits on one line of one form, the kind that says, in the language of bureaucracy, I was here, I built this, I decided where it goes. He picks up the pen, or he does not pick up the pen. Both outcomes happen to real men in real kitchens. Some men fill in the line today. Some men fill it in next month. Some men fill it in after the scare or the conversation or the Tuesday morning appointment with an attorney. Some men do not fill it in at all, and the state fills it in for them years later in a courtroom, using rules that have nothing to do with the man's actual life. The outcome is not the point of this examination. The examination is here to make the structure visible, to describe the architecture of a financial life built by a single man over decades, to name the strengths of that architecture and the specific point where the strengths become limitations, to follow the logic from the first automatic contribution to the blank beneficiary line, and to show that the distance between those 2 points is not failure. It is sequence. A man earned money. He saved money. He invested money. He managed money with a level of care and consistency that most people never achieve. And then a form asked him to give the money a direction that only a human declaration can provide. And the form waited, and the man paused. And in the pause was the entire distance between a life that is financially complete and a life that is narratively complete. The distance is not large. It is one line on one form, one conversation with one person, one signature on one document. Measured in effort, it is trivial compared to the decades of discipline that preceded it. Measured in identity, it is the most significant structural modification the system has ever required. Both of those measurements are accurate. The effort is small, the significance is large, and the man at the table is capable of holding both of those facts simultaneously, because he has always been a man who could hold complexity without being overwhelmed by it. That is how the filing cabinet got built. That is how the portfolio got managed. That is how the life got lived. This is one more complexity, the last one in the sequence, the one that asks the system to speak for itself after the builder goes silent, the one that asks the money to carry a message it has never been asked to carry. Not, I am solvent, not, I am disciplined, not, I'm secure, but I was here. This is what I built. This is what it meant. And this is where it goes. The room is still quiet. The refrigerator still hums. The light still falls across the table in the way it does on weekday afternoons when no one else is in the house, and the only sound is the sound of a man thinking. He has been thinking his whole life. That is what built this. Not luck, not inheritance, not partnership. Thinking, careful, sustained, solitary thinking applied to the problem of how to live a responsible life without the structural supports that most people take for granted. He solved that problem. He solved it definitively. The accounts are the proof. Now the thinking has one more application. Not a harder one, a different one. The application that turns management into authorship, that turns accumulation into direction, that turns a filing cabinet full of organized records into a set of instructions that another person can follow. A man's financial life is not complete when the numbers are sufficient. It is complete when the structure can still speak accurately for him in the room after he is no longer there. The pen is in his hand. The form is on the table. The afternoon is quiet. The accounts are funded. And the question, after all these years, is finally simple enough to answer. Not what is the money worth, but what is the money for? He has time. He has clarity. He has the pen. The line is waiting.